Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
No,
around the body. Jazz up!
He's off from inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal from inside the centre. Fuck! I can't believe it.
Good time of day, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 231 of Americans Watching the Footy. We're recapping round 3. I'm Ethan Castle, and I'm coming to you from, you probably guessed it, South San Francisco.
I am Benjamin Castle, coming to you from, you probably guessed it, San Diego. That's not where I was earlier today. I was up in Los Angeles seeing if another one of my favorite teams could disappoint me as much as the West Coast Eagles did in a rivalry game. The answer was, kinda yeah, but I saw much more comedy in the San Jose Sharks' performance against the Los Angeles Kings, in which they lost 8-1.
I'm glad I didn't see much of it, but I did see play where a couple of guys ran into each other, and that was funny.
Yes, that was highlighted as the Toyota tough hit of the game. But yeah, I saw comedy in that with the Sharks. I did not see comedy from the Eagles' end in the Western Derby. I saw a captain who looks like he doesn't want to be there. I saw a number 1 pick who isn't able to run games out in the middle, to do nice things elsewhere, but can't be in the middle where he's needed. And they don't even get a free McFlurry out of it. Is that a thing across the NHL now, the McFlurry minute?
No, it's a Kings thing, and you got it. Consider yourself special. But we're going to kick this thing off with news, and we're not going to do the silly news everyone sound, because the first news thing is sad. Andrew Krakauer passed away at the age of 42, suspected heart attack, played for Collingwood and Richmond. It was a name that we had known through his accounts being taken as evidence, talking about, some of the Collingwood racism situation.
He did reconcile with the club, and also before his 3-year stint with Collingwood, he was a Sandover Medal winner and best on ground at the grand final in the Waffle for Swan Districts in 2010. Also took the Mark of the Year in 2011, so that's probably the first time I heard his name. Yeah, he and Leon Davis had walked out on Collingwood and then came back in after some reconciliation. So we wanted to make sure that we took this time and recognized a short but well-lived footy life.
Also didn't know that he had kind of overcome some personal demons, some legal troubles. So cool that he was able to get back on his feet and end up having a pretty special career.
137 games, 152 goals, good memories from 2 AFL clubs and a Waffle club as well.
Let's see, speaking of legal stuff, I hadn't seen the Noah Balta video until now. He could actually have to do some time for this. If you actually watch this video, maybe the guy he attacked instigated something before they showed it, but all I see is Balta basically just charging at a dude and beating the shit out of him.
And it looks like he's already paid an out-of-court settlement to him, and this was a guilty plea.
Yeah, but it's not flattering.
No. I see nothing good on the physical end from this case for Balta, and Richmond could use him. But I can't see him playing in between the time his suspension ends and the time he's sentenced in April. That just wouldn't seem right to me. Let the legal process take its due course, then go from there. I'm kind of surprised that the club hasn't made an indefinite suspension.
More positive news. Congrats to South Australia on ending a 29-year Sheffield Shield drought. 29 years without a title in a 16 competition is pretty mind-blowing. That would be like an 87-year drought in the AFL, or let's do a little more math with this. 145 years in Major League Baseball or the NBA, or in hockey would be like 155, same within the NFL.
If we do a direct relationship, yeah. Also have to take into account that from the 6, just 2 make the final.
Like, considering population, you would expect New South Wales and Victoria to dominate, but they don't totally dominate this thing to the level that you would expect them to. It's an interesting competition, although I will maintain the two least Australian things about me. Number one, I prefer short form cricket to test cricket by far. I like the IPL. I don't care what it does to affect your tradition things. The IPL is awesome and just objectively hilarious, such as the random white cheerleaders. And rugby union is better than rugby league. Went down a rabbit hole after looking at the British and Irish Lions tour and just reminded me how much of a better game rugby union is.
I think you're entirely alone in those terms. I mean, you're definitely on a certain side of the Barassi line with that, I think. I don't know, though. Just like outside of New South Wales and Queensland, does rugby union have a stronger foothold than rugby league anywhere? Does it ebb and flow with the Wallabies' success?
Clearly it doesn't in Victoria, considering the Storm are super popular and the Rebels no longer exist.
Which is why I'm wondering if it goes along with the Wallabies' success, of which there hasn't been as much as of late.
But I did go down a rabbit hole with that and helped me figure out something about some of the later season fixtures. I think almost certainly because during, I believe it's what round is it? Round 20. Since that makes the G in use for Saturday, that Carlton Hawthorn would have to be Thursday or Friday.
For round 20 this is, and I'm thinking it would probably be Friday.
It could be either of those, and then
I'm just thinking, I don't think Carlton and Melbourne or Hawthorn and Port in Launceston would be a Friday game the prior week, but let's see where Port are at that point.
And then I would be shocked if Collingwood Richmond gets Thursday or Friday. I would think that's going to have to be Sunday, and you'll probably see some rugby lines on the field.
And a last big piece of news, we got an Australian in the Final Four, along with 3 Jewish coaches.
Yeah, Florida with a ridiculous late comeback to beat Texas Tech. They are moving on. Alex Condon, who I don't think is ever going to play for Collingwood, is going to the Final Four.
They have a Jewish coach in Todd Golden. So do Auburn in Bruce Pearl and Duke in John Shire.
There's been this discussion of like, oh, this is a likable Duke team without Mike Krzyzewski. If you ask me, it's still Duke, but I will say Colin Knuppel said something really funny.
Kneppel.
Okay. He was asked after the game about how do you slow the game down? He says I'm a pretty slow guy, so it's not that hard. And that was very funny.
Why do I feel like the old USC and Tampa Bay Buccaneers coach John McKay would appreciate something like that? Or Ross Lyon as well. Because Ross Lyon is pretty blunt. There's goofiness to it, but it's all just based in reality. Just like, I'm slow. I can slow a game down.
It was more like Stephen Schock would have said this. He's the one who, a couple years ago, playing in the college baseball tournament, gave a whole interview about Dippin' Dots and how he's scared of caves, but there are no caves around. Are Dippin' Dots a thing in Australia?
They have a .com.au website, so I would assume.
Okay. That seemed like one of those snack things that people there would just love. I don't know why. Are we ready to talk footy?
Time to talk the games. Thursday started ugly, got interesting, but yeah, the score lines ain't pretty. Essendon 9-18-72 defeating Port Adelaide 8-12-60. The Bombers on the board, and some of their youngsters really stood up in order to do that. Archie Roberts with perhaps his most complete game yet. Some electric stuff from Isaac Kako when needed. And Sadel Holy as well, coming on as the sub in the fourth quarter. Again, I don't like debut subs, and there were 2 in this game, but I
started to be more backlash against it,
which is good. But I get El Holy's case a bit more just because the nuances of playing near the end of Ramadan, where the lack of food and drink for a considerable part of the day definitely affects that sort of preparation. This isn't a predominantly Muslim country where we have the games totally stop at sundown.
He came in and turned what had been a pretty ugly game into a very fun one in the course of a couple moments.
Well, his first involvement was a 1-2 with Sam Durham that ended up setting up a Nick Martin goal. That brought it within 5 points early in the fourth quarter.
And yeah, that was the moment that really opened everything up.
Essendon seemed, for some reason, hesitant to go through the middle at times when you've got Zach Barrett and Jai Caldwell. And yet it wasn't either of the two of them that I liked the most from this game. It was probably Sam Durham for me. 28, 14 contested, 12 scored involvements and 2 assists. Did pretty much everything except get on the board himself. And when the team did start going through the middle war, he responded and woke up a bit that way too. But he'd already probably been Essendon best before that. But this was also a game that Essendon had trailed at each of the 3 breaks. Inaccuracy played a good part of that, but wasn't the whole thing.
I'd say first quarter felt like there were some moments that Port dominated where they could have probably taken a more comfortable lead. Second quarter, Essendon was the better team and was probably unlucky to go into halftime trailing. And we kind of hit that point that we get to see every now and then, a couple times a year in the footy world, where the universe kind of comes together and says, this game sucks. And I think people were being a little overreactionary. Like, yeah, it was bad footy, but it wasn't like the worst thing I've ever seen. I've seen so much worse. I think back to multiple Saints games against the Suns last year, against North the year before that. And I just wanted to remind you that, yes, this was bad footy for at least the middle quarters, but there's much worse.
Was it that Essendon were unlucky or just plain inaccurate because they had already kicked 2-5 by quarter time, 3-9 at halftime, and 5-14 at 3/4 time? They were never... Their GPS was always a little off. It's like or maybe the compass rose was swinging a bit.
I mean, I liked some of the chances that they had created. Not that I thought they had played great, but if we're going by expected score, which I do think in this case is a good metric, could have been like 90-69, and I think that's appropriate. I mean, Essendon was the better team in this game, deserved to win, and it was a game that they absolutely had to win.
It's weird. Port were ahead, despite not having real control a lot of the time, and also despite Jason Horne-Francis being out of it for much of the game. He certainly woke up in the 4th.
Here he is again, the horny one.
But didn't like his work for the first 3.
Yeah, his 4th quarter kind of saves him from worst on round consideration, but it was not great.
The bigger positives report for me was one of their youngsters, I believe in his first game in the 22, that being Christian Moraes with 7 marks and 2 assists. I think Moraes playing more on the outside drove the better parts of their game. And looking inward, it was more of Ollie Wines again, a goal from 31. So I know we had questions about his long-term spot at times last year. He's still plenty with it.
There's still like a clear Zach Butter-sized hole in the midfield. But yeah, with Moraes, with Logan Evans, with a couple of the other youngsters, you can really start to feel like in terms of ball movement, they've got this young group that's going to be just fine for a while. You don't feel as good about, guys that can win you contested possessions, but at least they have some guys who will make a pretty good backbone to this team for quite some time.
At the same time, contested possessions are becoming, honestly, a bit less important to the current game, and it's more turnovers and efficiency on rebounds. Yes, you need your contest bowls, but they can't just be contest bowls.
Tell you what else I liked was Alir. He was awesome. And credit to Asava Radagalea for stepping up in a super chaotic matchup. He was playing against Sam Draper in one-on-ones and largely had the better of him. Gave away a free kick very early that was like, of course. And then after that, he wasn't why they lost.
There was actually also a time where he correctly identified where the goal line was, and I believe he prevented Isaac Kako from getting a close-range kick. But I was looking back just through the stats right now at Archie Roberts' game, and I want to see more of this guy on the wing because he spent the second half pretty much fully on the wing and had 13 disposals, 4 marks at a goal in that time.
The combination of him and Sam Durham was what I really liked in this game for Essendon.
Yeah, Durham can be on the wing as well. He could be part of some overlaps there, but he could also be that third piece inside. I think if Roberts can nail down that wing spot, which is, I know, a big ask of a 19-year-old, but if he can keep some more time there, then it can allow Durham to be more versatile. And you could say the same with Nick Martin's versatility too. Oh, also, let's credit Jai Menzie because fans are quick to disparage him when he has poor games. He found his space, had his moments, had a goal, and was a productive part of this as it didn't win.
Yeah, his numbers weren't high, but he did a great job finding open space and getting involved and taking advantage of the touches he did have. Also, huge credit to Zach Reed. He was last week's worst on round, and he was honestly tremendous. This was such a nice bounce back for him. Things that weren't so good for Essendon, I would just fake every handball and kick before I actually kick or handball because they buy every single one. And I think Andrew McGrath has completely fallen off, at least to start this year. I think his talents have been totally space jammed.
Is there a distributing halfback who may have taken McGrath's former skills for himself? Who would be the monster here?
I don't know.
It's our mission to find out. In a world where a Canadian was a good footy player.
Couple of things have changed in the second half. First, Jace Burgoyne was quieted after a great first half. And second, Port took out Ivan Soldo, who had played really poorly. And then post-game, Ken Hinckley noted, and I agreed with him, that they struggled with opposing talls in the fourth. So it's who's going to step up for you? You need a tall defender or forward, or just you need a tall something to step up. That's simple. And nobody's done it yet.
Is this where Jeremy Finlayson gets another lifeline, or is this where Jack Whitlock maybe gets his debut? They were both goal kickers for Port Adelaide, as they only had 4 in the Sandful in their round 1 loss to Glenelg, which, by the way, features Jared Lyons.
Carlton 11-9-75, defeated by Western Bulldogs 12-11-83. Carlton had the first 4 goals of this game, led 27-4 after a quarter, never trailed until the fourth. This was pretty sweet. My experience watching this one was kind of interesting because second half, I got really tired. I managed to stay awake, but I was not super reactive, not fully functional. I would try to write something down in our notes after something important happened, and it would take me 2 or 3 times to figure out which players were involved to write it down, which doesn't happen if I'm fully functioning. And so I was also pretty quiet on social media, but it was really funny to see the Dogs tough this one out, where once again, Carlton's sucked in the fourth quarter. In 3 games in the second half, they've been outscored 156-67. And Charlie Curnow started off the game really well. They actually got 2 goals in the fourth quarter, but it fell off again. As for the Dogs, that's a hell of a win for a team that is still playing pretty shorthanded. I loved what I saw out of Riley Sanders, especially. And then Sam Dark, 2 goals in the behind, 17 disposals, 8 marks, 8 score involvements, 12 contested possessions. We're watching in real time, we're watching him become one of the most important talls, one of the most dominant. And this is only, his second year really playing?
Well, his first 2 years, he played 4 and 3 games respectively. I remember he had an injury that was a big part of that in 2023. 38 goals in his first full campaign last year.
I think he had a punctured lung or something at some point.
At least his own team doctor didn't give it to him.
This is not a shot at Port's medical staff letting concussed players play. This is
a shot at the LA Chargers and what they did to Tyrod Taylor. And actually, you could take shot multiple ways there. But yeah, Darcy has 7 goals in his first 3 games, and he isn't just fucking marking everything. This was his most involved game in other respects, too.
I mean, he is marking everything.
When he is, the Bulldogs' forward strategy can be kind of simple. At the same time, you can't let it be just too obvious, we're kicking to Sam Darcy every fucking time. There's got to still be some variation there. And some players did provide that.
Aaron Naughton had a really quiet game, but then kicked the go-ahead goal, which barely stayed inside the post with 4:22 left. And then James O'Donnell kicked the goal to pad the lead. James O'Donnell getting thrown in as a forward because they've been shorthanded. And, I've never been the biggest fan of him as a defender. I don't know what you do when this team is fully healthy, but as a quick fix, this totally worked, much to my surprise.
Yeah, and looking at some of the variation in terms of the entries, you've got Liberatore and Kennedy going up the middle. You've got Sanders able to do a few different things. And with the outside, there was James Harms with 5 inside 50s. And then if Sam Davidson were eligible for the Rising Star, he would win it this week, but he's too old for it. Davidson, 31 disposals, 10 marks, 639 meters gained. Really good stamina, 7 score involvements and 4 inside 50s as well. And it amazes me that this is a guy that Richmond let slip from right underneath their nose in the VFL.
You know who impressed me when I went back and rewatched the second half? Because I needed to go back and look at the second half more coherently. And he had pretty good numbers, and I didn't really realize it until I rewatched, was Bailey Williams. A week after playing back and not doing a very good job of it, he was kind of more in the midfield. He had 26 disposals, 6 intercepts, 8 score involvements. It was kind of like on the periphery of a lot of contests, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like playing just off a decent amount of contests, being one of those, maybe not first disposals off, but maybe second. That's the right type of role for him. Still an outside player, but definitely not a defender, to say the least. And yeah, the Bulldogs structure did return in some respects. Liam Jones and Buku Kamas together on the fullback line. Rory Lobb as a center half back. Still strange for me to see Harvey Gallagher line up as a fullback at the start of the game, but it worked, so you shouldn't question it. And yes, Matt Kennedy with a total revenge game, 2 goals and 9 clearances from 22. I mean, that's just fucking awesome to see. A heart and soul Blues player who just got totally disrespected near the end of his tenure after, I think, leaving his family shortly after a kid's birth to make it in time for the elimination final against the Lions, gets subbed out super quickly.
And it's funny, I thought he had been better. I think it was the North game. This might have been his weakest of the 3 games he's played so far, and it was still damn good.
He had 4 assists in the North game, so there's that. But the fact that this was his revenge game just made it all the more sweet. I didn't realize he's still only 27. Did you think Matt Kennedy was younger than you, Ethan?
No, he looks a little older.
The facial hair definitely contributes. He will be turning 28 next week. But I don't know, I can't help but laugh. You know, it's the Mel Brooks thing. Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. Carlton, you're the one falling into the open sewer here. You've only made finals from 0-3 twice in your history, and the last time you actually really finished 9th. It's also your 8th 0-3 start in the last 18 seasons, and that's more than they'd had in their first 111 VFL and AFL seasons. Thank you for that, Max Lawton. Patrick Cripps can't alone win you games. We know this. Even though Sam Walsh had 26 disposals, I want to see him do more in contests. He's a decently efficient player, and while Chera has more of the contest role, maybe it's time for him to split some of that time more with Walsh and to make it more of a triumvirate in there than a dyad right now.
Blake Acres was terribly inefficient in this game. That's something to note. I will say positives for Carlton. I like this game out of Adam Saad, smothering, intercepting, plus doing his usual stuff, pushing the ball up the field. And then I like Brody Kemp again. He ended up with 5 goals. And even without Harry Mackay right now, that just a combo of Brody Kemp and Charlie Curnow was a pretty decent 1-2 punch. And it's like, really, he only scored 75 with that?
Also got Jack Sobani, who you could swing into either 50. He was a defender this game, despite being listed at half forward, I believe. But that's another card you can pull. So you've got the right pieces there to keep contesting in the air.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't really like it when he was matched up a few weeks ago. Was it against Tom Lynch? But he did a pretty good job in this game. He went 5-1 in his one-on-ones, also had 9 spoils to go with 8 intercepts. I think the problem, some of it lies in depth. I know you highlighted Francis Evans as hardly doing anything.
He did have 4 score involvements from his 7 touches, but you're just looking for him to have the ball more, right?
Akers' 6 turnovers off of just 15 disposals was pretty bad. Oliver Hollins was much more quiet. Mitch McGovern is not at a great start to this season. Sucks to see Zach Williams hurt yet again.
It was more of a precautionary sub this time, but it was still early.
You had mentioned historical stuff with Carlton starting 0-3, and I forgot to mention this awesome stat from Andrew Gigat. Essendon had kicked 9-18-72 in both rounds 13 and 14 in 1957. And then they hadn't done it again until this week. So, well, they're off this coming week, but maybe when they get back out there against Melbourne, maybe they could do it again.
And how did 1957 turn out for Essendon? Let's take a look. They made finals and actually won a final. They made the grand final. Are we on Omen watch?
Because it wouldn't be back-to-back rounds. It's a little tougher.
Check back in with that later.
I will say I've hammered this home a bunch of times and it felt like maybe it could have happened again this week. Essendon's had this pretty impressive history of losing games after the siren, and they haven't won a game after the siren in more than 100 years. So, if you ever have to stop counting the number of games the number of days it's been since they've won a final, you could always go for days since they've won a game after the siren.
Goes back to 1913.
So Fenway Park opened before the last time Essendon won a game after the siren.
And Wrigley Field is, I think, about 8 months younger. Saturday afternoon, one of the longer head-to-head streaks in the AFL. Was that the longest or second longest? I forget.
I believe second longest. I will confirm it. I believe Geelong versus North is the longest. Yes. Geelong North is at 13. Melbourne had beaten Gold Coast 12 in a row, and that ended pretty decisively. Melbourne 8-14-62, defeated by Gold Coast 18-12-120.
The mighty Sun.
7-4 third quarter is where the Suns really tore this open, but they led just about the entire way. Usual suspects doing great things for the Suns. Matt Rowell, contested machine. Tuke Miller kicking 3 goals for the first time in his career, combined with his usual super accurate long kicks. This time they were down the wing rather than down the middle, but impactful no matter where you get them. And Noah Anderson just ended up racking up big numbers everywhere. I also really liked how Sam Flanders played in the middle. He ended up with 6 clearances, which is, I believe, second to Rowell, who had 13.
Yikes. Pretty amazing to me that Tuke had never kicked more than 2 goals in his career. Actually, he'd only had 7 multi-goal games. Just for somebody who had played 192 games before, I don't know, you'd expect it a little more. But he tends to play in the back of a lot of center contests, and there have tended to be taller targets there for the Suns. So I guess not entirely unexpected, still makes it quite notable. And yes, usual suspects you could talk about, but Rowell did more in this game than just winning the ball initially. He was more involved in handball receives. He's more looking forward and looking outside. Like, he hasn't gotten back to that goal game type guy that we expected he could be after the flying start he had to his AFL career before his injury in 2020, but he's playing more outside that direct, immediate contest, and that's a really powerful thing.
Also, really enjoyed Sam Clohessy as usual. 21 disposals, 9 marks, pretty active on the wing. Ben King got his shit together in the second half, ended up with 4 goals, and Sam Collins rarely tested, considering the Suns had 25 more inside 50s, but when he was pretty impressive. 11 intercepts, despite only having 10 disposals, 7 contested possessions, 5 intercept marks. And yeah, this ended up being a very dominant win for the Suns in front of a pretty empty MCG, and it brought forth some questions about Melbourne. You want to start with the good or the bad for Melbourne?
Well, personally, I think this game had more people attending than the Melbourne game against the Giants round 1.
Not by much.
It was 23-2-7-8 round 1, so it was 1,428 more fans in attendance for this one in round 3. The bad for Melbourne, I mean, Xavier Lindsay going down early after a promising start, thankfully cleared of serious damage. It was an MCL sprain for him, but that definitely put a damper on things. Meanwhile, Harvey Langford picked up the Rising Star nod after his 26 disposals, showing 10 score involvements, 2 goal assists, 6 clearances, and kicking 1-1. I can see a bit more of the Angus Brayshaw comparisons now, and I like what he's doing both outside and in. It's a shame that the rest of the team wasn't there with him. There was a thing about some effort here, along with confusion about who was picking up certain assignments. The Demons midfield just looked flat-footed when that's just really something unexpected for them. Clayton Oliver, despite his 31 disposals, I didn't like defensively.
I thought this was a down game for him compared to the first couple he had played. I really liked him in that GWS game. I did not like him at all in this one. And there was talk post-game on Fox Footy, and I totally agree that it is a concern that I think we're getting to the point where this Melbourne core that looked so good and, won a flag not long ago, the core alone is not enough to lift you to victory.
I mean, I don't think it ever truly was on its own. That was a pretty deep list that you had there in 2021. Luke Jackson wasn't really considered part of the core quite yet. Some under-recognized contributions from guys like Tom Sparrow and Trent Rivers. I want to see Rivers more attack in the middle. You see Sparrow getting the midfield assignment, but was quieter in this game. Rivers was busy with 22 and 9 marks, but I want to see him get more in the center there because something's got to be fixed. Now, it's not, we've still got these guys in the middle. They can at least do things at the source. Each game thus far, Melbourne have lost their clearances by at least a dozen. Minus 12 against the Giants, minus 12 against the Kangas, minus 16 against the Suns. It does really feel like the end of an era. And also defensively, what's the future there in terms of actual key defense and intercepting? Yeah, you got a pair of all-Australian defenders back there, but both are damaged goods at this point, both with lengthy injury histories. Jake Lever is 29 and wasn't out there, and Stephen May is 33.
Stephen May was the worst rated player on ground in this game. 0-3 in one-on-ones, gave away a couple of free kicks, I think 3 of them, and complained nonstop about obvious correct calls against him, which just makes you think he should go play for Gonzaga.
This was a very Drew Timme game from Stephen May.
Without the headband and without scoring 30 points.
Now the 30 points went against him this time.
If you have any other option defensively, I would take out Blake Howes. He is really disappointed. Both Bailey Fritsch and Jacob Van Rooyen have been poor. I hope that continues for another week. But this game reminded me why I was low on these guys to begin with. Now, it is not all doom and gloom. It is only mostly doom and gloom. I thought Harvey Langford was really freaking good. The only midfielder that really matched up with the top-tier Suns midfield. And it is a sign, hey, with this whole core of debutants, you won a flag a few years ago with a group of guys that kind of all came out of the same draft class. Maybe you'll be able to do something similar with this group, but it's just you got to cleanly pass the baton from one group to the next, and I don't trust them to do that. There were some interesting post-game comments from Max Gawn about, some of their leaders not playing hard enough. That's not a good sign. And yeah, I just don't trust this group to be able to cleanly shift from one generation to the next, which, yes, I know it's only 3 games, but between this and a lot of last year, I think the writing is on the wall there. Also, it sucked that Xavier Lindsay got missing.
Yeah, you're missing Caleb Windsor right now. That's another one that I want to see pulled into the center more. He's really been kept out on the wing. See what he can do there because you've got to find some solution outside of Petrarca Oliver Viney, and that in and of itself also isn't working right now either. But there's too little of a gradual transition possible here. You've got these top guys all getting up there late 20s to mid 30s already. And then there's a pretty steep drop in terms of age, unless there's the mature agers that are in there. And I still do not like the fact that Jacob Van Rooyen is not taking ruck contests. Caden McDonald and I are disagreeing on this on Twitter. I said before this game, I want to see Van Rooyen in there just to actually get him in the action more. Caden argues, need to develop Van Rooyen as a forward instead. Well, it's not like Aiden Johnson did anything all that special. Ooh, 5 hit-outs and 2 clearances. Still not that clean. 2 free kicks against that I noted. Van Rooyen, a goal from 7 and an assist is nice, but these are games that just keep calling out for more from him. And I know that things were complicated a bit by Matt Jefferson not being there, but that just means Van Rooyen should have had even more involvement. Again, he kicked 30 goals last year and 28 in 2023. This is a worryingly slow start for him.
I will give Aiden Johnson a pass, considering he's new to this and had a really good game round one.
Aside from his suspension. But again, for me, it's just more, are his opportunities coming at Van Roy's expense?
I don't think that necessarily has to be the case.
I mean, with Geelong not having a real ruck, maybe Friday will be the time for AJ and Melbourne to shut me up if they can pull off a shock of shocks.
Yes, the Suns are 2-0, and both those wins are on the road. No, they have not really beaten anyone impressive yet, but I like what I'm seeing more. I'm still going to need to see more than this to believe that something is truly different. But they have shown the ability to win outside of Queensland already, which is good. Who would have thought one of the most anticipated games of round 4 would be Pros at Suns, the first game Saturday afternoon?
I'm legitimately pumped to watch this one.
I'm hoping whatever high school baseball game I go to Friday will be over with quickly so that I can be home in time for the opening bounce. I mean, just real quick, since we're not previewing, I mean, I think the obvious other games to be amped for are Kolkar, because it's Kolkar. That's what we call Collingwood Carlton, if you haven't noticed. Kind of like the Brazilian Fla-Flu rivalry. Frio Bulldogs, and then maybe North against the Swans, kind of low-key interesting.
Port Saints could be interesting, or just go really sickos.
That's true.
You were talking about the Demons and how their 2021 premiership was supplemented by that trio coming in from, I think it was the 2019 draft class with Luke Jackson, Kazi Pickett, and Trent Rivers. You know what's a team right now that has all these young guys coming in and maturing around the same time is, well,
the mighty Sun! Yay! 2-0!
You got Bailey Humphries starting to find the footy more, kicking 1 goal, 1 from 23, 6 tackles. Will Graham with 2 goals, Ethan Reed with 1 as well, and taking on some tough contests. Jed Walter getting in there too. Just things are starting to come together a bit more for them as they're maturing at the same time. And I mean, Damian Hardwick has done this once before. Look, I'm not saying he's going to take the Suns to the flag, but the point is, I think they got the right sort of leaders in place to guide this maturing group.
Bailey Humphrey was one I talked about during our season preview.
You were waiting for him to finally click and have some consistency.
He's done that in not the role I would have expected, but he's done it so far.
You expected him in more of maybe a half-forward flank to inside 50 role. Instead, he's involved in the center.
Real quick, just want to mention next few games for the Suns. Host the Crows, then face North way out in the Barossa Valley, I guess?
Gather round.
And play the Tigers at Marvel, which is just awesome trolling putting that game there. I just want to emphasize how glad I am that that game is being played at Marvel.
Do Richmond break their I hate coming here trend because they're facing Dimma?
I don't know, but any outcome is funny. And then it gets interesting. You host the Swans. They could easily go into that Swans game at 5-0. You clash at the Gabba.
Oh, that's that great Labor Day Sunday night one again.
And then out to Darwin for the Bulldogs and Hawks.
Cracks knuckles.
We spent a lot of time talking about that. I think it's just, I guess, just we are definitely going to be talking about the Suns, which is good because after some of the predictability they've had, either they're going to get it done or we're going to all be exasperated that nothing has changed.
They killed a 2015 135, defeated Richmond 7-11-53. This was an 8-point game at the half. And then Richmond kind of remembered, oh yeah, if we keep going this hard, we're just going to run out of gas. And oh, we've run out of gas. That was fast. 11 scores to 4 in the third quarter as the Saints brought it out to a 40-point lead and 14 goals to 2 in the second half. We almost had another sub-debutant here, and that was changed because of injury. Jack Steele had a knee injury, and that meant Toby Travalia was in the 22 for his debut and looked like he belonged. That was one of the many positives for the Saints for this game. I mean, we know that the Saints generate so much from their halfbacks, and it was 10 score involvements for Jack Sinclair and 9 for Naziah Wanganeen-Milera, which are ridiculous numbers for, again, halfback flanks to get. Yes, this was against Richmond. Yes, the second half was kind of easy. Take those stats with however many grains of salt as you want. they still look like good stats. I also want to say this was the 10th and final Maddie's match. I think it's a shame that Maddie's match had a time limit on it. Why stop that? You keep getting good attendance for this. Why not make this an annual tradition like Spud's game?
I assume this was a Revolt family thing. So that's where the decision could have come from. I don't have a ton to say about this game. I think this is definitely the game we'll spend the least time talking about. But I do want to mention, first off, if you're Richmond, this is probably the ideal game. You play a good half, and then you get knocked around, you hurt your percentage, you lose, you put yourself in position for better draft picks, but also you played a competitive game for the first 2 quarters. And then I was impressed with a few different players for St. Kilda. First off, Max Hall, just kind of that tall marking presence along the wing. He fits the system well. He ended up with 2 goals, 2 assists. Just a really positive game.
You called him a tall there, but I mean, he's only 183 centimeters. I guess he just plays above his 6-foot size.
Yes.
And that's never a bad thing. I can think of another player who definitely plays above his size for the Saints and had some good moments. And that was, of course, Mitch Owens, who opens up their forward look a lot. The Saints can do this by committee, which has me liking what they've done these past couple of games, but also concerned that it could go away whenever Max King is set to return.
Brad Hill and Zach Jones each with 3 assists, and then 5 players with 2 assists, including Jimmy Webster, who I think this was easily his best game all around as a Saint. 7 score involvements, 7 intercepts. I always think of him as a stay-at-home defender, and he was active on different parts of the oval in this game, and just easily the most positive takeaway I've had about him in a while. Also, 6 spoils. That was the other stat I was looking for.
I bet we can find other good Webster games in his first 7 years before we started watching, but I'd say that this is definitely his best since we became aware of this sport and who he is.
Yes. Sorry, for some reason, I had thought he had come over from another club for some reason. He has never received a Brownlow vote. I don't think this game would get him one, but I was a little surprised to not see him in the coach's vote.
I'm trying to remember how many games it took former Saint Jason Blake to register his first Brownlow vote, because they made a big deal out of that when it finally happened. It was his 210th game where it finally happened. For Webster, this game was his 168.
It was also cool, like when Blake Hardwick got his after 157 games. So would Webster be like the in-house leader at this point?
I'm not sure. There are other like stay-at-home defenders who have never gotten enough love.
Taylor DeRay.
Despite being a Premiership player, Doc has never gotten a Brownlow vote in 214 games through 2024. And not just a Premiership player, he's got 2 Premiership medals.
But you know, sometimes that also doesn't help you as you're playing around other great players, even though you are winning more games.
You know, more often than not, people like picking the non-finalists to get the Brownlow, and since we've started watching, more often it's been a player from a team that's gone reasonably far.
Maybe what you should really be looking for is like someone who's, you know, a team that's got like a clear standout midfielder that you expect to finish between 5th and 8th, which makes it all more ridiculous that Bont hasn't won one.
I like Matt Rowell and Caleb Sarong's odds. I mean, Sarong, we'll see where Frio end up, but the way the Suns are starting, Matt Rowell. The Tigers are 0-10-1 at Marvel since Damian Hardwick said he hates coming there. And they are currently going to be without Ryan Mansell for 3 weeks because the warning was given for pushing guys into contests. And then Mansell pushed Liam O'Connell into a contest.
I would probably reduce this to 1 or 2 games.
The problem is that is not how the flow charts or matrix or whatever you call it works. If there's a head injury, it's 3 games. And that's the problem.
Now, if he played for Carlton and did it, they'd find a way out of it.
No, they probably would have suspended O'Connell. Or Rafi Torres again.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer No fancy software needed. It's so easy you can edit it while drunk. And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do. Best of all, it's completely free. Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
This is episode 231 of Americans Watching the Footy. I am Benjamin Castle at BenjaminHK01 on Twitter.
I'm Ethan Castle at Castle Media on Twitter. That's with the K. I'm going to say it like 1,000 more times because, again, no matter how many times you say it, people will still do it with the C. Added with hotel reservations, 50,000 other things. Kind of amazing.
Maybe people just really like former USC, Patriots, and Chiefs quarterback Matt Castle.
Collectively, we are at Americans Footy. Brian Harambe is on Instagram exclusively at Cat Named Brian. And speaking of Brian, happy belated 26th birthday to Brian Myers.
Saturday night in the Footy, 2 games that were both 2 goals or less at the final siren, both with their share of drama. In Launceston, get used to nighttime footy in Tasmania. Hawthorn 10-16-76 defeating GWS 9-10-64. This game was significantly windy, left of screen, which favored the Giants in the first quarter, and it showed. Hawks in the second quarter, and it showed. Giants in the third quarter. Oh, wait a minute. Never mind from there. Hawthorn kicked 4-2 despite working against the breeze, even though, it had dropped off a bit at that point, but that was the turning point of the game. It had started definitely mid to late second quarter with Will Day taking over, and then he entrenched his stance as the post-halftime leader for the game as well. Really strong pressure, turnovers, defenders staying higher, clogging the corridors, just a sound game plan all around, and there was only so much that Sam Taylor could do to hold up before where the Hawks could actually convert on some of their chances.
I have this on in the background with the Geelong game in the foreground, and as the game turned, pretty much every time I looked up, it was Will Day doing something. So that checks out. I thought it was pretty funny, in the first quarter, how many points the Hawks scored.
Tua.
And in the second quarter, the Hawks allowed Tua.
And then they only scored Tua times Tua in the fourth quarter, but they held their own.
Well, it helped that they only allowed 2 goals in both the third and the fourth quarter.
Hawthorn still have a concern with stoppages in their defensive 50, and Jesse Hogan being back in helped disrupt some things for the Hawthorn defenders when they had been strong before. But once Hawthorn actually were able to escape their own defensive 50, start kicking lower, then the game was on their terms. They protected the corridor throughout, then they used their numbers to run through it, and that's where the territorial dominance came in, regardless of whether or not they had the breeze. And this was also Nick Watson's most complete game yet. At this point, be scared. If you're not already, be scared.
I saw there was some discussion about his ducking and playing for high tackles, and I'm starting to think it's kind of one of those know the workplace rules. Yeah, and Joel Selwood's like, HR. And then when Nick Watson does it, oh, you're sweet.
Watson kicking 1-1 from 21, 11 contested, 5 marks. I remember hearing some analysis and suggestions that he could end up having more of a midfield split, which kind of made me think Shea Bolton. He was also going at 86% efficiency. You'll like the fact that Josh Weddle was playing well over the full field, less of a fumbly game from him, and more actually lowering the eyes and making the connections that he needed. And an impactful 30, 10 contested, and 5 tackles from Frenchie, Cam McKenzie as well. He was one of the higher ranking players on ground, and I've been high on him. You've come along to him as well. I mean, it's not that hard to come along to a guy who's a top 10 pick, but you're starting to see it.
But a lot of people were saying, during the preseason, wow, he looks just way better than in past years. Hearing that from one person is whatever, kind of when a guy shows up in spring training for baseball in the best shape of his life, that doesn't do anything. That's the emptiest phrase. It's up there with some of the stuff with, the 2K times or whatever.
Give us actual fucking analysis rather than training down the house. Wondering at this point for Hawthorn, like, who the fuck makes way when Connor McDonald and James Worpel come back, because they could both be ready for their next game at the end of Gather Round. And also after that game, Jack Scrimshaw's suspension ends. This is going to be a crazy almighty list to squeeze here. And yeah, we'll probably squeeze out some of the older guys like Luke Bruce and perhaps Jack Gunston. Would make it tough for Sam Frost to get a game. I mean, look, injuries can always help thin things out, whether you want them to or not. You'd rather have more options than not enough. Finn McGuinness might be one to take out, but I also like what he's doing as a half forward and being more physical while still also not just being a tagger. Now, between the list crunch and one thing that happened towards the end of this game, there was a world where, like, shit could hit the fan for Hawthorn, but I think, unfortunately, they like each other too much and their culture is too damn good, like actually good, for this to cause any problems. But I feel like if it was at a club that, you know, wasn't like the darlings of the media, the Mabior Chol situation would become a much, much bigger thing. I remember you would text me about him getting subbed out and we were trying to classify the sub. For those of you that are new to this, we tried to define each sub under a few different categories. Medical, that's pretty self-explanatory. A victory cigar, think Adelaide in their first couple weeks. We're up by a bunch. We're going to take out a good player so they don't get hurt. Unused, my favorite. Doesn't happen enough. Tactical, just like, you know, we need to bring in fresh legs, or we need to go smaller or taller, or swap out a forward for a defender. And then there's the you suck sub, which happened, I believe 5 times this round, maybe 6 or 7. But that's just when a guy gets subbed off for a poor performance, which has been rare so far this year. It was supposed to happen in this game, at least, for Mabior Chol, and then he just, like, stayed out there and wouldn't come off, which is objectively hilarious. The broadcasters were getting into it, too. This was multiple minutes, like 3 or 4, and yeah, the ball was forward, but the call had clearly been made. They can't really do anything about this, though. Like, maybe it's something internally, but, like, he is your one tall target right now. You can't do anything about his spot until Mitchell Lewis gets back. Jack Gunston? I mean, he's kind of a tall target. He's in there. I wouldn't have Gunston as the only one at this point in his career, and he was surprisingly inaccurate for a decent amount of this game. He ended up kicking 2-3 with a miss. This was the first defeat of the year for the Giants, obviously. Played out of the game in the third quarter when their pressure let up and they were having trouble escaping some defense. Lachie Whitfield just kept kicking high out of defense too, and I couldn't get why with how much the wind was affecting things. His kicks are such a barometer for the Giants. When he's kicking accurately and deliberately, it's such a huge difference for them, and they can really start some of the tsunami. These felt, indiscriminate. And honestly, Tom Green's kicks can be the same way. Yes, Whitfield will get the praise for the number of possessions, but actually look beyond even the effectiveness. That we're just like, do these kicks actually advance the Giants? Do you see strategy behind the kicks? Tom Green just indiscriminately kicks a bunch too, especially when he's helping out defense. He gets the initial touches. What else does he do from there? I tend to not like it. And I want to like Tom Green, but his kicking has provided some issues lately. There are some games where, if you get it out and a guy can pick up the ball on the run after, it works, but that's not a super reliable thing. There are some games and some matchups where that is the right thing to do, and it works really well. Yeah, I'd rather have someone that could, just hit a guy on the run or hit a guy to set up a kick mark sequence. I got to take this in a different direction. I'm looking at Mabior Chol's Wikipedia page, and a couple of the nicknames on here are amazing. Two Phones, that is an actual nickname. There's a Sarah Black article that refers to that. But there's another nickname on here that I can't find a source from anywhere, but has been on his page for like minimum of a year. I'm searching through the revision history because this is the content you come to Americans Watching the Footy for. Benjamin, please do not look at his Wikipedia page. Nothing's going to beat the Bangladesh Hammer. Oh, debatable. This one's pretty good. Really? You want me to tell you, or are you going to look at it? All right, tell me.
Linguine arms.
Linguine arms?
Linguine arms.
I'm sorry, that has to be fake.
I'm trying to find when the page was edited to include that.
There is no way he's actually Linguine arms. Just like Jack Hanahan being the Bangladesh Hammer.
It was added May 20th of last year. And I love it. He is actually old Marbs. And yeah, there was a Richmond podcast that called him Two Phones. Linguine arms, yes.
It was just added by this IP. It's this IP's only edit.
It's gotta stay. It's gotta stay. You know, unfortunately, the Bangladesh Hammer, that one got taken down a while back.
This was a baseball player, Jack Hanahan, with absolutely no connection to the country of Bangladesh whatsoever.
That one was up there for a while, too. I mean, here's my thing with Wikipedia vandalism. I like funny, tasteful vandalism. Kind of like how Stephen A. Smith tolerates mild profanity. And I like harmless Wikipedia vandalism, like throwing in a ridiculous nickname for somebody instead of just, saying they were born in, Fucknut City.
The Bangladesh Hammer was on Jack Hanahan's page for about 16 months. I hope Linguine Arms lives for even longer.
I am going to start calling him that.
Bobby or Linguine Arms Chol. Brisbane Lions 10-10-70 defeating Geelong 9-7-61. This was my background game, and the Cats led it by 32 points. And then, like the Lions have done a couple times, they turned things on in the second half, shore things up defensively. The Andrews and Payne pairing most definitely shined. And even though Lachie Neal's not had a great start to the year, it doesn't matter when Hugh McDamage does his thing. People are quick to get on McCluggage because his actual kicking for goal is often inaccurate. Who cares about that when you have 30, 17 contested possessions, 7 clearances, 6 intercepts, and 8 tackles, and you're the difference maker through the middle? It was him with Will Ashcroft in support.
So first off, Brisbane played a really bad first half. Like, I was obviously happy to be up by as much as 32. Don't get me wrong. I was happy to have a 24-point lead going into halftime. But I was also, not overjoyed because it didn't feel like we were playing that great. It just felt like the Lions, with the exception of Harris Andrews, had been pretty bad. And Harris Andrews was really the one player that gave the Lions a full game. He kept the ship from sinking in the first half and then was really good in the second half. And then Jack Payne really helped turn things around in a third quarter where the Cats did not score a single point. It was a 27-0 third quarter, and for the second half, 48-13 altogether. Basically, Geelong just couldn't get past the middle of the field in the third quarter. Now, my concern going into halftime was, Brisbane just got a goal off of forward pressure creating a turnover. Is there going to be more of that? No, it was just once he got out of the forward 50, once he got out of the defensive 50, couldn't get it any farther. And Jack Payne was huge in turning that around with a couple of intercept marks. And I'm really pleased to see that both coaches acknowledged him in the votes, because I thought that's the exact sort of performance that would usually go unnoticed. Andrews remained good. And then, yes, McCluggage really took over. Josh Dunkley was pretty solid. Both Ashcroft brothers were good. And Cats just played a shitty second half, with the exception of Zach Guthrie, who, similarly to how Harris Andrews kept the ship from sinking in the first half and, kind of plugged a few leaks, Zach Guthrie did that in the second half. Jack Henry did a pretty good job there as well. But even with Bailey Smith back, the midfield was not good enough. Smith, while once again, I'm impressed with his ability to fight through tackles and keep plays alive, he was not efficient in the slightest in this game. He was kind of just kicking to nobody in particular a lot of times.
My thought is similar to Tom Green. He's just a carefree kick too often. Green, it could be more out of defense. Smith, it's less out of defense. It's just they tend to be flatter kicks. They gain ground, but they're not nearly directional enough. And that was the problem we had with the Dogs as well.
At 28% disposable efficiency. But here's the thing, though. I think with Tom Green, a lot of the time, it's just getting the ball out of the middle. Whereas with Smith, it was a lot of stuff along the wing, and he was trying to kick through tackles, whereas Tom Green, a lot of times in those, it's unimpeded. Tom Stewart was an unsurprising laid out. Chris Scott had said the week before that, if a guy's a chance to play, you give him as long as you can. And I had a feeling after I heard he wasn't in the captain's run on Friday, he came out. Mark O'Connor got back in and did a decent job. Tom Atkins had Lachie Neal for the first half, and then Neal moved forward and O'Connor took him. I probably would have still kept Atkins on him unless it stopped working, just because I like the logic of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I was going to pause you there when you said O'Connor did a decent job. Relative to Atkins, he did not, and that was one mistake from Chris Scott.
I understand that you want to keep Atkins in the middle with his physicality and ability to get clearances, so I'm not upset about that. Someone else needed to step up, and that didn't happen for quite a while. Patrick Dangerfield was very good in the fourth quarter. He was not good in the third quarter. He was nearly invisible in the third quarter. And also, you have a sub in Mitch Nevitt that could have helped there. I didn't like making Nevitt the sub in the first place.
Neither did I.
And I don't think he's the right player for it. We talked on the Hoops Crew post game, like, this team hasn't figured out really how to master the sub role yet.
More importantly to me, they haven't figured out how to master just about anything when Tom Stewart isn't in there defensively. The structure, you're going to have the structure be mostly based around one guy. But when you know that he's likely not going to be in there and you still end up that shaky, I'm wondering what it is that the players and staff are missing there.
I mean, the back six was not the issue in this game. And I think this is a game where Stewart would have ended up in the midfield. But yeah, Nevitt, especially when you couldn't get a clearance at all, you're getting absolutely smashed on clearances. Like, that plug should have been pulled a lot sooner. He ends up coming in for Sam DeConing, which is kind of surprising. And it was like, all right, I guess you want more speed. And Mark Blitzov slides into the ruck. But I thought there were other guys who would have been a good choice, whether that be Shannon Neal, who just has no hands, or Ted Closey, who wasn't. I'd probably put Closey back in the sub role and rather have Nevitt in after this week. And I was calling for Closey to be in the main 22 after last week. I know. He was kind of mad.
People disagree with your other main selection position, though.
This was a down game from Lawson Humphreys. His kicking accuracy was not as good as it usually was, and he's just not physically able to thrive in one-on-ones, and Brisbane kind of targeted him and tested him a few times, which is probably smarter than Geelong kicking the ball anywhere near Harris Andrews. If Jack Payne beats you, sure, but you shouldn't be letting Harris Andrews beat you. And with back-to-back short weeks, playing Friday this week and then Thursday for Gather Round, it seems like an opportune time to give him a rest and get Mitch Duncan in there. But I can confidently say that this was the worst game I've seen Lawson Humphreys play. And while it was subpar, if that's your worst game, that's pretty good sign. Need more out of Jeremy Cameron. That's pretty simple. I know they've tried him to do some wing stuff. Been weird. I would just probably put him forward and try to get the ball to him. I think getting Sean Manna back this week will help with the forwards. I don't get why he got a second game in the twos. Especially, remember last year that loss to the Bulldogs? A super wet game where the thought was Chris Scott overreacted and went too small. For a wet weather game like this, wouldn't it have made sense then to get Sean Manna in there instead of give him a second game in the VFL? And I think Tyson Stengel's struggles in part have to do with that. But I also think Stengel, I've never really seen him go into a contest, He's great at taking advantage of open space, but he's not a guy you ever expect to take a contested mark.
If you're still trying to test Manna and see if he's actually good to go at the top level, then your thought right away should have been, all right, Mitch Nevitt has to be in because you need that physicality in addition to Atkins, because we know Atkins is going to play a tag role. With Manna having had that first game, though, and having been all right in adverse conditions before, yes, this is a game that was kind of calling out for him.
And I think one way or another, this forward group is going to look different soon because, even in the game against the Dockers, despite the score, it was, there was some garbage time goals there. And other than that, it was, a fair amount of, stuff created by the midfield. I don't know whether that means maybe you end up testing DeConing forward or totally skewed just off of one really awesome moment. But maybe, say you're able to get a healthy back line, put Stewart in back and, Jake Kolajashny. Maybe Connor O'Sullivan ends up working into that role as he continues to fill out his frame. Jack Henry forward?
You're thinking about the Richmond game from a couple years ago where Tom Stewart concussed Dion Prestia.
Yes, that is the exact game I'm thinking about. Now, because Jack Henry's been so good defensively, it would need to be a situation where they've the team's defending really well, but just can't score.
This seems like a fourth quarter last ditch type thing. And considering the game was still very much in the balance in the fourth quarter, I don't mind it not happening.
Other than throwing Tom Stewart into different roles, why doesn't this team do more of that stuff like at ends of quarters? That's something that for all of the shit I will talk about Carlton, they can throw Curnow around just for the last couple minutes of a quarter. Why are we not doing some of this?
Hawthorne could do it with Sicily. His versatility there. Blitzov's obvious extra support guy in the back. Shifting back to the Lions, though, the fact that despite a short preseason from being the Premiers, being disrupted by Cyclone Alfred, working through injuries, a lot of their top players not firing, haven't seen it yet from Neal, for example. They're 3-0 and conceding just 72 points per game. In the second half so far, they're averaging just 25 points against and not even 20 inside 50s against. So it's defensive midfield work from the likes of Josh Dunkley leading the way, and sound play in terms of getting out of defense and staying out of there too. Their rebounds have been strong. Andrews and Zorko, the biggest parts of that. And that's where Ryan Lester could continue to factor it as well for as long as he's in the lineup. And then in terms of the defensive one-on-ones, Harris Andrews, 6 for 7. Jack Payne, 4 for 4. Noah Answorth, 3 for 3 in terms of contested one-on-ones.
I also thought Ryan Lester just stepped up in a lot of the right moments, kind of quietly effective there. And, you'd be happy to have just 2 of the 3 of Andrews, Payne, and Lester firing. And they had all 3 working. I think just this team's main concern shouldn't even be Lachie Neal. It should be just that they've started really slowly in all 3 games.
Because the team is so deep, the defensive unit doesn't get nearly enough love outside of maybe Harris Andrews. So I definitely just wanted to take that time there and acknowledge it. And yes, when Payne is firing, that tall duo is as strong as any. I love watching them play off each other. Damn, they're spoiled there.
Yeah, I was saying, it's there's an embarrassment of riches on this team right now. Umpiring came under fire towards the end of this game, as it should have. Here's my thing with the umpiring. I didn't have objection with the 11 free kicks the Cats gave up in the third quarter. It was shitty, undisciplined play. It was that there weren't a few called against the Lions that should have been called.
But you're not going to claim moral victory here. Geelong still lost the game, and deservedly so. We're wrapping.
Absolutely. Umpiring did not affect the outcome, but there was a lack of free kicks paid to the Cats, and then still some amazing inconsistency with insufficient intent. Also, we went somehow overnight from everything is holding the ball to nothing is holding the ball. Forgot to mention in that third quarter, Bruce Reville came in for Kai Lohman. He was an instant injection, a little bit like El Howley the other night. Ollie Henry might be the anti-Charlie Curnow, cannot get a call to save his life. And Brad Close needs the ball more. And maybe when you're not scoring, maybe just thrust him into the middle for a minute and see what happens. Oh, and Oisin Mullen was good. That was a positive. After he's caught a lot of crap from this entire fan base, and people wonder why he gets thrust in there so regularly. This was a good game for him. I think wet weather footy benefits him, not just with how he plays, but also he comes from a very rainy place. And he did a good job.
I mean, I don't know how rainy County Mayo is compared to the rest of Ireland, but it's Ireland, so there's that. Adelaide Crows 17-12, 114, defeating North Melbourne 12-678. Yeah, 9 of those goals came from the For the Win tall trio. Because they haven't lost yet, I'm still displaying it as FTW, Fogarty, Philthorpe, Walker. And I like having it in that order too, because it seems to be the hierarchy right now, with Fogarty being the steady, full forward, key position guy. Philthorpe also having the second ruck time and showing more of his fuller skill set. And then Walker, that's what the embarrassment of riches is like here. Taylor Walker's still plenty capable in year 17, outdoing Tristan Jerry for crying out loud in the ruck to get a couple goals there. I think he got 3 grabs straight out of the ruck in this game. And yet, because you've got the other 2 there, he gets more opportunities and could also possess the ball a bit more around half forward. He had some surprising fumbles in the first half, cleaned that up in the second. And as if the Crows didn't already have control by then, they had a 3-goal lead at halftime. It was out to 27 points at three-quarter time, and there wasn't really a question about who was winning this game. This is the Crows' 15th straight home win over North, and that includes one final, and their 7th straight head-to-head win overall. Adelaide also joined the 1988 West Coast Eagles as the only teams in VFL AFL history to win every single one of their first 12 quarters. And it's just the whole by committee thing going at it again. I mean, yes, Isaac Rankin is maybe their most electric and best player, the one who's going to get the votes, but he's never, ever alone. And he's going between positions so often, and other guys are doing that. Alex Neil-Bowen going from the middle to sometimes trying to occupy even Charlie Combin in the goal square. James Peatling willing to play anywhere and everywhere physically. This has been such a fun start to the year for the Crows. And yeah, it's been against easier competition, but it actually looks like they're building something. And I hope for their sake, they actually are. But huge prove-it games for them coming up. They've got a road trip to the Suns this coming week. And then to start, they've got Geelong. So I'm going to hold off on saying, oh yeah, the Crows are actually something until then. But hey, they're 3-0 and firing on all cylinders.
Rankin wasn't super efficient in this game, but this might be the most I've ever seen him impact a game without scoring a goal, which just tells you they really got him locked in this midfield spot right now, which is kind of bizarre. And it's working, because I thought last year, their success was, they were rotating different guys between forward and midfield, and he's kind of just stuck in the middle, and it's totally working. And you're probably not going to be able to rotate as much with Josh Rochelle hurt. Broken ribs, going to be 4 to 6 weeks. That sucks.
Yeah, that was from a contest with Coleman.
The main takeaway, I think we both felt this way. And now that I've rewatched this, I still feel this way. It wasn't like they really excelled in one area. They were just kind of substantially the better team across the board. And that's not like North played poorly. If you look at the stats where it was a pretty wide difference, was efficiency inside 50. So I guess that makes Ben Keys look pretty good because he was doing a lot of the delivery there.
It makes Keys look good. It makes Jake Saligo look good as well. Again, I said at the start of the year, Saligo is definitely the one who's cast as the midfield leader. And through these first 3 games, it looks like he actually is stepping up into that role. Keys with 2 goals from 20, Saligo with 1 from 28, and strong deliveries from both of them. Saligo led the game with 9 inside 50s. I love that Adelaide were keeping on pressure until the very end. Again, the game wasn't in doubt, but it seemed like a team that was fighting for every point, every smidgen of percentage they could get. And with these tests coming up in the next 2 weeks, it's nice to see them play a full 80 minutes and scrap for those points. And the fact that they put up 114 despite the Talls not really getting chances in the air in the first half is all the more impressive. Now, I wasn't enthralled by this game for a good bit. Honestly, like the third quarter was a bit of a slog at times. And, you could tell Adelaide were going well by transition, but not a lot of it seemed that exciting to me. But once more marks were being converted, once Walker had cleaner hands, then I felt like I got more into this game. And not just because I was the one taking notes as Ethan fell asleep.
Yeah, we kind of switched off at halftime. I was similar to the Bulldogs game the other night. I was like pretty out of it, where by the end of the first half, it was like I had to check a play 3 times to get it on the notes because I just couldn't remember something for 5 seconds, and then it was nap time.
Good basketball must take a lot of energy out of you.
Yeah.
Because Thursday, before that Bulldogs Carlton game, you had seen the 2 Sweet 16 games in San Francisco, which included Maryland playing and a huge Texas Tech comeback. And then Saturday, the Florida comeback to get Alex Condon and Todd Golden and the Gators into the Final Four. So I think that was probably it.
But yeah, I didn't think North was especially bad. I don't think they've been that bad in either of their losses. Caleb Daniel was not great. He had one where he got smothered by Jordan Dawson. Just some of his stuff coming out of the back 50, I I don't quite understand what he's trying to achieve. Individually, I really like Jai Simpkin, and Nick Larkey was pretty difficult to stop once again.
Made life really tough for Mark Keane, who I think got another tripping fine. He just keeps doing that and doesn't get suspended for it. Or no, he had been suspended for it at Collingwood. Maybe it needs to happen again. Luke Davies-Uniacke definitely propelled North with some center wins. I noticed that in the third quarter. And I liked what Dylan Stevens did, taking charge as the sub. So I want to see him get a chance in the 22. But I'm going to link some of North's struggles in the second half and some closeout jobs for them to Harry Schiesel's struggles to start the season. It's just been very middling for him when they expect and need a lot more from him.
Yeah, he might be playing through an injury. That wouldn't shock me. I think Mark O'Connor might have been playing hurt at the end of last year. But yeah, I mean, Schiesel's still gotten good disposal numbers, but he hasn't been as efficient. And he hasn't given us, any of those moments where it's like, whoa, Harry Schiesel with the coolest disposal ever. That has not happened yet.
And then there was the Western Derby. West Coast Eagles 10-8-68 defeated by Fremantle 15-16-106. This was not fun to watch outside of the first 15 minutes. It just straight up wasn't. For me, from my Eagles perspective anyway, Ethan probably got a kick out of it because Fremantle's his second team. He can talk down to me. And also just many of the players that he kept going well. Caleb Sarong, a fourth Glendinning Allen medal. I believe that's tied for the most all time.
Yeah, I think you could have given it just as easily to Andrew Brayshaw. I know, disposal count kind of rules all with this, but Brayshaw was more involved defensively. He had more of a full oval impact. And Luke Jackson was pretty darn good as well. There were a bunch of different doctors I liked.
How about your man Nathan O'Driscoll with the opening goal and a really solid 22 disposal, 6 tackle showing?
You could probably list 6 or 7 players before you even get to him, which is a pretty amazing reflection on how they played. Murphy Reed up front, awesome work. Shea Bolton has still not gotten the goal, but impacted the game positively overall, got 10 score involvements. Yeah, I like Brayshaw's 11 score involvements, whereas Sarong, for all his clearance work, only had 4. Bailey Banfield made the most out of his time out there.
Happy 100.
More than half of his possessions were contested, ended up with 18 disposals, a couple of assists, believe 6 score involvements, was that? 5 score involvements. And then contributions as well from Jai Amos, Michael Frederick, Isaiah Dudley. Patrick Voss did everything except actually kick goals for most of the game. Also, he poked Josh Tracy in the eye with maybe the worst high five ever.
Voss has everything but the consistent finishing ability. If he can nail that down, then I mean, this Freo attack is already terrifying enough. And yes, Dudley with 2 goals in an early burst on debut. That was awesome. Objectively so. This is Eddie Betts' nephew, Kazi Pickett's cousin. Fits right in.
I get why for an Eagles fan this is frustrating, because it seemed like just a whole lot of unforced errors, whether that be unnecessary holding the ball penalties, again, Tim Kelly, for some reason not tagging Caleb Sarong. I know some coaches really don't want to ever exercise tag, but I would love to, you're a first-year head coach, you're getting a feel for your list. What better opportunity to go out there and test, all right, can this guy tag, or what can this guy do tagging, or just what do we look like as a team when we tag?
Why not have Elijah Hewitt in there the whole time rather than as the sub for exactly?
I've liked him. He's definitely been a positive so far this year.
Why have Clay Hall straight up out? That fucking boggled my mind.
Yeah, he was good last week. I think I had mentioned in our episode a week ago that I had liked him.
You haven't done nothing wrong either, unless there was something going on at training that I don't know, but I feel like that would have been reported. It was a shock to most, if not all, that he was out after 15 disposals, 7 clearances and 3 tackles last week. Yeah, could have fucking used that many. And meanwhile, Harley Reid cannot run out of game in the midfield. I'm sorry. He can't. The fact that he can't at this point makes me wonder what the hell was going on in the summer with conditioning. As for now, yeah, give us some more half forward time. The board will hit the scoreboard. the more he'll build up his confidence and maybe actually want to stay. But I expect it to be on one side or the other of that Hawthorne-Essendon round 1 game next year. And then co-captains, fuck you, Liam Duggan. Fuck you, Oscar Allen. Duggan for pure ineptitude, despite trying too hard. Allen for looking like he did not fucking care that Alex Pierce was kicking his ass. And then not really doing anything about it either. It's sent back and still failed to impact things. Try and actually be involved in some chains. Get up on the wing, be a tall mark there. No, just stay there, do nothing against your fellow co-captain. Fuck off.
Here's what's so crazy about that. A year ago, Oscar Allen, remember, was like, oh my God, I'd run through a brick wall for this guy. This guy is the ultimate leader. Like, what the heck happened to that? It's one thing to just not play well, but like this was supposed to be the energy guy. This was supposed to be the leader, and that was definitely lacking. Even if the performance isn't good, like there's enough intensity that can get there, and there wasn't in this. It's so funny, after those couple of games, after last week actually playing pretty well, like it was a solid loss, played well, hung in there and just ran out of gas against a superior team, to this week regressing to that form from round 1 and just doing so many things wrong themselves instead of, getting beaten by a superior team. Like, you're going to get beat by superior teams more often than not. But don't beat yourselves.
Don't beat yourselves at the selection table, as he did with keeping Clay Hall out of things. Don't beat yourselves in game with a lot of poor kicking, difficulty getting out of defense a lot of time, having pressure fall off super early, Freo plus 15 points in the first quarter alone. And then just don't sit there and not make the necessary changes. Oh, also, Jeremy McGovern will be out multiple weeks with a groin injury.
I thought it could have been worse than that because it was a non-contact injury. Harley Reid, I meant to mention last week how this is like, if you wanted to explain tall poppy syndrome to someone, he would have been it. And like, it was pretty clear. I mean, even Adam Simpson being very candid about it. There were just some moments in this game where we're like, why are you going after Caleb Sarong for nothing? That just made no sense. Because, I mean, the talent, even if he's not getting the ball a ton and impacting games to his maximum capability, like, he'll have moments just naturally where the talent shows up and it's fun to watch. It's just like so many unnecessary dumb things.
I don't want to talk about this team. So I'm glad I'm done talking about this team right now. Other than the fact that I guess Ryan Merrick actually stood up a bit in defense, and it was nice for Ruben Jinby to actually keep giving effort. If only the leaders did the same.
I liked Archer Reed.
They're actually doing all right at times in the ruck. That's something there. But how many Eagles can you actually say this loss is not on you? Or like, I can still see more positives from your game than negatives or neutrals.
Archer Reed, maybe Liam Baker.
Liam Ryan started all right, fell off. Merrick and Jinby, I could say, could be there. It was fun taking notes on this game, and by fun, I mean not fun, because there were 2 L. Ryans, 2 Williamses, and 3 Reeds.
When we had, in the Brisbane-Geelong game, you had a Cameron on each team, you had 2 Ashcrofts, you had 2 Henrys.
2 Neils.
Yes, 2 Neils as well. That was the one I was missing. So that's right up there. Better signs for Freo, encouraging. Big game against the Dogs, and then they play against, I can't remember, and I have to look it up. I think they just have Richmond out of Barossa. So take care of that.
What a waste of Bolton's first game against the Tigers.
Yeah. And then round 6, they have the D's, who currently look like a mess. We'll see what changes then. Round 7, Freo Adelaide. Maybe that makes up for the disappointment last year that I was so hyped up for.
And Friday primetime.
Let's do our awards. And first, let's give out the Award of the Week award.
Oh shit, I'm unprepared for this.
Well, if you recall, Nelson Muntz was once given the Bully of the Year award, and there was an award on, I forget if it was that or another Simpsons episode that was given, Award of the Year at the Awardie Awards. Came up with that. Maybe we should do something with that, like weird holiday of the day. I need to look up like silly awards. I'll start doing that. Mark of the Week.
Collingwood wins. It was Jamie Elliott flying past Buko Kamas. The Geelong vote did end up being split. There was no uniting around Connor O'Sullivan. So that was an undeserving winner there for Jamie Elliott. Your round 3 nominees, I'd say your runners-up are Caleb Smith with a shoulder to Jack Higgins back, and then Harley Reid. Hey, he has his moments. He kind of went sideways into this jump against Heath Chapman. He had one shoulder into the back. But Mitch Georgiadis took a really clean hire with both shoulders on Zach Reed, who otherwise played a pretty good game. And I've got Georgiadis as the easy winner.
I actually really liked that Harley Reid one because it did not look like your textbook mark. His knees and elbows were pretty close to each other. So just because that one looked different and the Georgiadis one was more standard but not jaw-dropping, I'm going to go with Harley Reid on this.
Interesting. I just think it was good form from Georgiadis and more what you typically see in a hanger. So I don't know. Sometimes the typical is a good thing.
And yeah, Connor O'Sullivan should have won last week. Goal of the week round 2 went to Isaac Rankin from the right pocket. I preferred Sam Powell-Pepper. Both were quite good.
I called that Rankin would win because it was one of those longer plays.
Your nominees for round 3, you got Machito Pepper Owens grabbing a touch kick on the boundary in the right pocket against Luke Traynor, shuffling his feet and snapping. You got Will Day picking up a Josh Weddle spoil, getting away from Tom Green and Jesse Hogan, and then kicking a ball that was supposed to probably just center for a teammate. It ends up bouncing in the forward 50 and then kind of changing angles and rolling through the goal square. And then you have Liam Ryan picking up a ball that Jeremy Sharp dropped, knocking in a check side goal from 31. Benjamin, how do you feel?
I feel very tired, and I feel like Liam Ryan highlights might be my only copium this year with the Eagles, and maybe some Harley Reid here and there. Will Day's description is definitely the longest here, but the kick to me doesn't stand out as much because it probably wasn't meant to be a goal. Still, I expect Day to win, wouldn't be mad.
I really like the Mitch Owens one here. As cool as the Will Day one was, I'm going to go with Owens. That was the one that kind of definitely had the best effect on me in real time.
Will Day was more, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? That went in.
But I do remember seeing that in real time as well.
Whereas Owens, which is a very quick thing, it's just like, oh, damn, Mitch, there you go.
All right, behind of the week, one runner-up, Nick Larkey kicking through a Lockie Scholl tackle but hitting the post. The winner for behind of the week, though, has to go to Cam Rayner, where he picked up a Ryan Lester kick, ran along the left boundary, and ended up hitting the post with a kick that would have given the Lions the lead. Unfortunately, they did take the lead for good a few minutes later.
The Larkey one was a closer ranged one and maybe more intense with the actual play itself. It just wasn't aesthetically pleasing to me. Rayner had the nice run and everything, nice high snap, and just doinked it. Assist of the week took a little bit of time for us to find, but for the first time, I believe this is a handball assist that wins it, with Zach Jones finding Darcy Wilson through a tackle on the ground in the later goings of that Saints win.
Worst on round is an award that I made up, really, where we picked the worst player that did not get subbed in or out of a game, or was, I think we also rule out late changes, guys that were thrown in last minute. You would mention Francis Evans as a nominee for just being pretty quiet.
But he did have 4 score involvements from his 7.
Stephen May for giving away a bunch of free kicks, losing every contested mark, and just crying about perfectly legitimate calls against him and getting beat in general, spearheading a defense that gave up 120 points, is a worthy nominee. But the winner, who really caught a lot of heat, not just from Benjamin, but from most Eagles fans, is Oscar Allen for basically doing nothing.
Absolutely outclassed and embarrassed by his rival captain, Alex Pierce. And I mean, good job, Moose, but Oscar made it look like he didn't care when I thought he was going to be a total Mark Lacroix, give everything type.
The main character last week, after your vote, it was the double middle finger North fan. There just weren't a lot of great nominees there, and that one was fun, and there was enough discourse about it after, and it ended up making the poll and then winning our vote.
We could have just gone with middle fingers as a whole, and maybe we still can in retrospect with the whole Harley Reid middle finger and how fans responded this week at the 9-minute mark of Western Derby by holding up middle fingers.
Yes, I love that, and a decent amount of the stadium got into it, and you could hear the crowd cheering and laughing.
You see, now the Derby was still fun for Eagles fans.
the most Australian thing. I would love for this to become an every 9th minute thing.
You get a pretty mixed bag of people in glasses in Eagles games, so it might catch on. Main character for this week, was trying to think of like real standouts. You could have a couple real standouts in games. I mean, I loved what Hugh Kluggage did through the middle with Brisbane, but I feel like there is more than just taking over a game when it matters that goes into a main character selection. And we're going to give it, I'm not sure if we've given it to a player on debut before. I really don't think we've given it to a debut sub before.
Did we not give it to Logan Morris?
No, we gave it to BT and the Horny One.
Okay.
Wow. So congratulations to our first debut sub main character for everything he is and for everything he did to ignite Essendon in the 4th quarter. Todd El Holy, congratulations.
With that, we're just about ready to wrap up. As you know, at least for now, we're not doing preview episodes. Hopefully we can get back into that rhythm at some point, but we'll take suggestions, whatever you want us to talk about. Go off topic, be silly, be very serious. Happy to listen. I do want to make my prediction for main character because that is the one thing I really missed from previews is I made some silly main character predictions, and I've got an especially silly one for you to round out this show.
Well, I tend to do the more serious main character picks, and round 4, you've got Collingwood and Carlton going at it. The time feels right one way or another for Magpie Jesus to surface at key moments.
Yes, we haven't seen him yet this year. I'm shocked by that. I think 99% chance we get to see him. Also, if Carlton was to win, I think Jack Silvani will have a lot to do with it.
And I wouldn't be mad at all because Silvani.
But if I'm going to pick the main character for this week, I've seen the future. I've been visited by ghosts of what holiday instead of Christmas? I don't know. I've been visited by ghosts of April Fool's Day, past, present, and future. Your main character for this round will be Suleiman the Magnificent,
the Ottoman ruler who greatly expanded his empire and died in 1566.
Yes, his enormous turban will, upon review, make contact with the ball before it goes across the line and turn a goal into a behind. I'm not sure in which game, but that will cost the team 5 points, and they will end up losing because of Suleiman the Magnificent.
You see, I feel like we should have waited for that until the AFL's best ethnically Turkish player Errol Golden surfaced.
Or, if they're going to declare a round as Ottoman Empire round.
Guys don't think about the Ottoman Empire nearly enough.
I know, I was just going to say, and that disappoints me.
And that's how we're going to close things this week on America's Watching the Footy. He's at Castle Media. I'm at Benjamin HK01. The executive producer is somewhere.
He's sitting on the bed right here. His name is Brian Harambe. He's on Instagram at @catnameDbrian. And ladies is pimps too.